and it doesn't sound like good news at all. And we're joined now to talk a little bit more about that, talk about their game tomorrow against South Africa, their last group game. Of course, they're already qualified for the World Cup semi-finals, by the Australian cricket writer Paul Dennett. Paul, good morning. Is this a big blow, Sean Marsh, to the potential Ashes hopes later this summer?
Hi guys. Look, it's a blow for Sean Marsh and his very popular cricketer, and has had a very successful career for Australia. But I think there was a feeling he probably was towards the edge of calculations for the Ashes squad. There's been an influx of players doing particularly well, and with Steve Smith and David Warner coming back into the side, it actually may be that this is his last opportunity to play for Australia now gone, which would be a great shame because, as I said, he's been a good servant for Australian cricket, but I don't think it's a big blow for the Ashes.
All right, fair enough. Well, that's it's not the news I was hoping for, in a way, but I do see where you're coming from. And Peter Handscomb, I see he's been drafted into the squad for the rest of the World Cup. I mean, realistically, Sean Marsh, after a couple of games earlier in the group stage, wasn't figuring in the first team plans, was he? So I don't think, barring another couple of injuries, it is going to have a big effect. But, there's a game against South Africa tomorrow. It's the last one of the group stage. What sort of team are you expecting Australia to field? Will it be the first choice 11, keep that momentum going, try and get another victory? Of course, games against South Africa are always fiercely contested if you're an Australian. So is it going to be a first choice 11, or will there be some changes made to rest players?
I don't think they'll rest players. I think that they might have to sit Glenn Maxwell out potentially, because he also got a nasty blow in this training session, which must have been some sort of crazy training session with balls flying everywhere. But I think that this game against South Africa, although it's nominally a dead rubber, is pretty important for Australia to win, because if they don't win it, and assuming that India beats Sri Lanka, Australia will then be facing England in the semi-finals at Birmingham. And I think that, with no disrespect to New Zealand, they'd much rather be taking them on at Manchester. They'd get to stay at Manchester all the way up into the semi-final. So it'd be a far easier road towards the final.
What has happened with Australian ODI cricket? Because 12 months ago, obviously Australia came over here and England absolutely battered them 5-0. What has dramatically changed, really, just in the last 6 months, that mean that Australia could top the group stages, which no one really would have predicted a matter of months ago?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, the last 4 years after the World Cup, Australia's one-day performances have been pretty poor, and culminating in that horrible series a year ago where England got 480 in one game and Australia, were lucky to get to zero. I think partially it's obviously the return of Smith and Warner has helped, and I just think that the regime that Justin Langer has brought in has been really good. I think that the levels of fitness and the attention to detail in fielding reminds me of way back when Bob Simpson was brought in the mid-1980s and said, look, we're just going to hit 300 balls a day and make you the best fielders in the world. And I think that level of attention to detail, permeates the entire squad. And I also think they've said, we're not going to try to match it scoring 400 with these other sides. Start a little bit conservatively and then go from there. And in a tournament format, I think that really helps.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Paul. Also, I think the difference between this competition, for example, and last summer when we won 5-0 is the return of the likes of Stark and Cummins, who weren't playing, and have reminded us just how brilliant they are with that new ball. Stark, obviously, new ball and old ball in particular. So that obviously has made a big difference too. And you talked a little bit, you alluded to the fact that they'd rather play New Zealand in the semi-final. I mean, in Australia, is there a lot of talk about the potential? Because I know there is here, we're talking about the potential for an England-Australia final. Is there a bit of excitement around that? Or are they a little bit more open-minded, if you like? Are they thinking that actually a final against India would be just as exciting, just as good? Who are they keen to see Australia come up against if they were to reach a final?
Well, I think that probably selfishly it would be who Australia has the best chance of beating. And I think that at this stage, it's a hard one to say, but I think that Australia would, even though they lost to India in the group stage, they might actually prefer to play India going into the final rather than England. England seem to be bouncing back to their absolute best. In terms of rivalries, the Australia-England rivalry cannot be touched. It's the number one sporting rivalry that we have. But the rivalry with India in the last 20 or 30 years has absolutely skyrocketed and is now our number two. So either way, it's going to be a big game if Australia can win the semi.
Going back to Mitchell Starc, I mean, he's simply been incredible. Where do you think he ranks already amongst ODI bowlers? Because I think he's got as many one-day or World Cup fifers as Wasim Akram. I mean, he's just been incredible. For me, he's the best bowler in the world. Where do you think, already in his career, before he retires, where do you see him, I suppose, in regards to ODI cricket, in terms of the bowling of all time?
It's a really good question, and I saw a set of statistics the other day that surprised me. It was basically all Australian ODI fast bowlers ever, and Mitchell Starc's record is the best. Glenn McGrath is close in terms of average, but when you look at the strike rate, he's by far and away the best. He was the dominant player in the 2015 World Cup. If Australia do go on to win this World Cup, and he's going to be the number one reason that they'll do that as well, then it's debatable whether he's absolutely the best in the world of all time. But I think that you'd have to say that as far as Australian bowlers concerned, he's right up there.
Yeah, he's just certainly a fearsome prospect. I don't like the idea of England having to come up against him at another point in this World Cup, but I fear we will, whether it's in the semi-final or the final, and he will be striking fear into any opponents that come up against him. Quite incredibly, he's been bowling. Paul, it's been great having you on again. Thanks a lot for your time. Obviously, we'll be watching Australia-South Africa keenly tomorrow and seeing whether or not England draw them in the semi-finals or not. Thanks for your time. That was Paul Dennett, Australian cricket writer there, joining us all the way from down under. Great to hear an Australian perspective.